Talk to yourself this way for just 3 days in 2026 and watch everything change. I want you to understand this simple but powerful truth. Your life is always moving in the direction of the words you consistently speak, especially the words you speak when no one else is listening. You may not realize it, but you are having a conversation with yourself all day long. Those quiet thoughts, those whispered statements in your heart are either building you up or holding you back. The way you talk to yourself is shaping your life far more than you realize. Before anyone else speaks into your future, before circumstances take form, before opportunities appear or disappear, there is a quiet voice inside you that is setting the direction. That voice is not neutral. It is either building faith or feeding fear, either strengthening hope or weakening confidence. Many people pray for change, ask God for breakthroughs, and wait for things to improve, but all the while they are speaking words over themselves that contradict the very future they desire. You were never created to live discouraged on the inside. God designed you to be filled with hope, expectation, and confidence, but that doesn't happen automatically. It happens intentionally. Every day, your thoughts are forming sentences, and those sentences are forming beliefs. Those beliefs eventually become your actions, and your actions determine your results. Long before something shows up in your life, it shows up in your self-talk. If you listen closely, you'll notice patterns. Some people constantly tell themselves, "I'm not good enough. I'm too far behind. I don't have what it takes." They don't say it out loud, but they think it repeatedly. Over time, those words settle into the heart. They become familiar. They start to feel true. And once they feel true, they begin to limit what that person believes is possible. Not because God is limited, but because the mind has been programmed for defeat. What you keep telling yourself today will become what you believe tomorrow. That's why it's so powerful to change the conversation, even if it's just for 3 days. When you interrupt years of negative, faithless self-talk and replace it with words of life, something starts to realign. You may not feel different immediately, but your spirit recognizes truth when it hears it. Your heart responds to hope, even if your emotions lag behind. So instead of waking up and saying, "Another long day, I'm exhausted already," you say, "God is renewing my strength. I have energy for everything I need to do today." Instead of saying, "I'm always struggling financially," you say, "God is my provider. I'm getting wiser with my resources, and increase is coming." You're not ignoring reality. You're choosing faith over fear. You're choosing to speak what God says rather than what circumstances suggest. There is creative power in your words, especially the words you speak about yourself. Scripture tells us that life and death are in the power of the tongue. That doesn't only apply to what you say to others, it applies to what you say to yourself. When you consistently speak defeat, your mind begins to look for evidence to support it. When you consistently speak faith, your mind begins to expect good things. Expectation changes perception. Perception changes behavior. Many people don't realize they are talking themselves out of blessings. They say, "I'll probably fail anyway," and then they don't give their best effort. They say, "I'm just not lucky," and then they overlook opportunities. They say, "Nothing ever changes for me," and then they stop believing change is possible. But when you start saying, "God is ordering my steps," you walk with more confidence. When you say, "I'm growing and learning every day," you give yourself permission to improve. When you say, "My future is bright," you begin to prepare for it. For these 3 days, you have to become very aware of your inner dialogue. When a negative thought comes, don't just accept it as truth. Challenge it. Replace it. If a thought says, "You're too old," you say, "God's timing is perfect. My best days are not behind me." If a thought says, "You messed up too much," you say, "God's mercy is new every morning. I am redeemed and restored." This isn't positive thinking alone. This is faith-filled thinking. It's aligning your mind with heaven's perspective. You may feel awkward at first. You may think, "This doesn't feel natural." That's only because you've been practicing the opposite for so long. New habits always feel uncomfortable in the beginning, but the more you speak words of faith, the more natural they become. Your mind starts to renew. Your confidence starts to rise. You begin to see yourself not as who you were, but as who God is shaping you to be. Don't underestimate how much damage careless words can do to your own soul. Saying, I hate my life, even jokingly, sends a message to your spirit. Saying, I'll never be happy, creates a ceiling over your joy. But the moment you say, God is working all things for my good, you lift that ceiling. You make room for peace. You invite hope back into your heart. For 3 days, let your self-talk be kind, encouraging, and full of expectation. Speak to yourself the way God speaks to you. He doesn't shame you for your mistakes. He doesn't remind you of your failures. He calls you chosen, loved, forgiven, and capable. When you adopt that same language, you start seeing yourself differently. And when you see yourself differently, you show up differently. You'll notice that when pressure comes, you recover faster. When challenges arise, you don't panic as easily. That's because your inner foundation is stronger. You've been reinforcing it with the right words. Instead of collapsing inward, you stand firm. Instead of giving up mentally, you stay hopeful. That strength didn't come from circumstances changing. It came from the way you've been speaking to yourself. God has placed incredible potential inside you, but that potential needs agreement. Your words are your agreement. When you say, I can't, you disagree with what God says you can do. When you say, I'm able, I'm equipped, I'm called, you come into alignment with His purpose. Faith is not passive. Faith speaks. Faith declares. Faith calls things that are not as though they were. As you practice this for 3 days, you may be surprised how many times negativity tries to creep back in. That's okay. Don't get discouraged. Just gently redirect your thoughts. Say, no, that's not who I am. I am becoming better. I am moving forward. Every time you do that, you are strengthening a new pathway in your mind. You are training your thoughts to serve you, not sabotage you. The change may begin quietly. You may simply feel a little lighter, a little more hopeful, lit, more motivated. But those small shifts matter. They are signs that something is happening beneath the surface. Your words are planting seeds, and seeds always grow when they are watered consistently. Keep watering your mind with faith. Keep speaking life over yourself. Keep declaring that God is at work in you and through you. When you look back, you will realize that everything didn't change because your circumstances suddenly improved. Everything changed because you did. You stopped being your own enemy and became your own encourager. You stopped rehearsing defeat and started declaring victory. And that is where real, lasting transformation begins. For a long time, many people have believed that change begins on the outside. They think if circumstances improve, if people treat them better, if opportunities finally show up, then they will feel confident, peaceful, and motivated. But the truth is, lasting change always begins on the inside. And one of the fastest ways to spark that change is through the way you talk to yourself. The inner dialogue you carry every day is either opening doors or quietly closing them, shaping what you believe you deserve and what you believe is possible. Most battles are not lost in public. They are lost privately in the mind. Long before someone gives up on a dream, they have already talked themselves out of it. Long before they stop praying, they have convinced themselves it won't matter. The enemy doesn't need to defeat you externally if he can convince you internally that you're not capable, not worthy, or too far behind. That's why self-talk is so important. It's not just about motivation, it's about alignment. When your inner words align with God's promises, your life begins to move in a new direction. For 3 days, making a decision to speak differently to yourself can interrupt years of negative patterns. Negative thoughts don't usually arrive as loud declarations. They come as quiet assumptions. This won't work. I always struggle. Nothing ever changes. When you don't challenge those thoughts, they become agreements. But the moment you speak back, the moment you say God is still in control, I am not stuck, this is temporary, you break that agreement. You remind your soul who is really in charge. So instead of telling yourself, I'm under too much pressure, you say, God is giving me peace that passes understanding. Instead of saying, I'm overwhelmed, you say, I am one step at a time and God is ordering my steps. These words may seem simple, but they carry spiritual weight. Words shape atmosphere. When you speak faith, you invite God's presence into your thoughts. When you speak fear, you invite confusion and heaviness. You have to understand that your mind believes what it hears most often. If it constantly hears worry, it learns to worry. If it constantly hears hope, it learns to expect good things. That's why repetition matters. Speaking faith once is encouraging, but speaking it consistently is transformative. Over 3 days, those repeated words start forming new expectations. You begin to wake up with a little more peace. You start approaching challenges with a little more confidence. That's not coincidence. That's the power of alignment. Many people carry a harsh voice inside them, constantly criticizing and condemning. They replay mistakes, relive failures, and remind themselves of what went wrong. That voice may sound familiar, but it is not the voice of God. God convicts, but He does not condemn. He corrects, but He does not crush. When you start speaking to yourself with grace, patience, and belief, you mirror the way God treats you. You stop punishing yourself for past mistakes and start preparing yourself for future victories. For 3 days, choose to speak mercy over your life. When you fall short, say, I am forgiven. I am growing. When you feel insecure, say, God has given me gifts that are needed in this world. When you feel delayed, say, God's timing is perfect and nothing is wasted. These declarations may feel bold, but they are rooted in truth. And truth has the power to set you free, even from the limitations you placed on yourself. You will notice that when you talk to yourself with faith, your reactions change. You don't get as easily offended because your identity is secure. You don't panic as quickly because you trust God's control. You don't compare yourself as much because you understand that your journey is unique. Inner stability comes from consistently reminding yourself who you are and whose you are. Your self-talk also determines how long you stay in a season. Some people remain stuck not because God wants them there, but because they keep reinforcing the wrong narrative. They say, this is just how my life is, and they settle. But when you start saying, this is a season, not a sentence, hope rises. Faith stretches. You begin to look for growth instead of escape. You begin to ask, what is God developing in me here? For these 3 days, speak strength into your weakness. When your body feels tired, say, God is renewing my strength. When your mind feels heavy, say, I have the mind of Christ. I have clarity and peace. When fear tries to take over, say, God has not given me a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. You are not just comforting yourself, you are reminding yourself of spiritual truth. The more you do this, the more you'll notice a shift in your confidence. You'll stop waiting for others to validate you because you are grounded in what God says about you. You'll stop shrinking back because you believe you are equipped. Confidence rooted in faith is not arrogance, it is trust. It is believing that if God called you, He will also empower you. Over time, this way of speaking becomes natural. What once felt forced begins to feel familiar. Your mind learns a new language, a language of faith instead of fear. You begin to default to hope rather to worry. That doesn't mean challenges disappear, but it means they no longer define you. You face them from a place of strength, not insecurity. As these 3 days pass, you may realize that the biggest change is not outside of you. Your circumstances may still be unfolding, but your perspective has shifted. You are no longer constantly battling yourself. You are no longer tearing yourself down internally. Instead, you are cooperating with what God is doing in your life. This is how everything begins to change. Not through dramatic events, but through daily alignment. Through choosing words that lift instead of limit. Through speaking faith when fear would be easier. When you change the way you talk to yourself, you change the environment in which your faith grows. And in that environment, growth is inevitable. One of the greatest shifts you can make in your life happens when you stop allowing your thoughts to run on autopilot and start guiding them with intention. Many people think they are simply reacting to life, but in reality, they are responding to the words they have been repeating to themselves for years. Those words have become familiar, comfortable, and unquestioned. They sound like truth, but often they are just habits. And habits, once recognized, can be changed. Every day your mind is listening, it is recording patterns, expectations, and assumptions. If you keep telling yourself that life is hard, people are unfair, and you're always behind, your mind will work hard to prove you right. It will notice obstacles more than opportunities, delays more than progress, and problems more than possibilities. But when you begin to change the narrative, when you start speaking words of faith, peace, and confidence, your mind starts looking for evidence to support that new story. For just 3 days, choosing to speak differently to yourself can disrupt years of limitation. It may not seem significant, but consistency creates momentum. When you wake up and say, "This is a good day, God is with me, I am capable of handling whatever comes my way," you set a tone before the day has a chance to speak to you. Instead of reacting to pressure, you approach the day from a position of faith. Many people unknowingly partner with fear through their self-talk. They say things like, "What if this goes wrong? What if I fail? What if I'm not enough?" Those questions may seem harmless, but they train the mind to expect negative outcomes. Fear grows where it is entertained, but faith grows where it is spoken. When you start saying, "God is guiding me, even if I make a mistake, He will redirect me," fear begins to lose its power. You have to understand that God is not waiting for you to be perfect to bless you. He is waiting for you to believe. Belief is not just something you feel, it's something you speak. When you consistently declare what God says about you, you build inner agreement with His plans. That agreement creates confidence, and confidence allows you to move forward even when the path isn't clear. For 3 days, refuse to label yourself by your past. Don't say, "I'm the person who always messes up," or "I never finish what I start." Those labels keep you stuck in old identities. Instead, say, "I am becoming disciplined. I am learning to finish strong. God is changing me from the inside out." When you speak growth over your life, you give yourself permission to evolve. Your self-talk also affects how patient you are with the process. Many people get discouraged because they expect instant results. They say nothing is happening and they quit too soon. But when you start telling yourself something is happening even when I can't see it, you stay consistent. You trust that God is working behind the scenes. Patience grows when faith is spoken regularly. There is a deep connection between peace and the way you talk to yourself. When your inner dialogue is rushed, critical, and fearful, your soul feels unsettled. But when your inner dialogue is calm, trusting, and hopeful, peace follows. Saying, "I don't have to have all the answers today," releases press. Sure, saying, "God is in control," quiets anxiety. Those words act like anchors, keeping you steady in uncertain moments. For these 3 days, practice speaking encouragement over yourself, the same way you would encourage someone you love. You wouldn't constantly remind them of their failures or tell them they're not good enough. You would remind them of their strengths, their potential, and their worth. When you extend that same kindness inward, something heals. Shame loses its grip. Confidence begins to grow. You may notice that when you change your self-talk, your relationship with others improves as well. That's because insecurity often shows up as defensiveness, comparison, or jealousy. But when you are secure in who you are, you don't feel threatened by other success. You can celebrate them without feeling diminished. That security comes from regularly affirming, I am enough. God's plan for me is unique and good. Your words also influence how you handle setbacks. When something doesn't work out, you can say, this proves I'm not meant for this. Or you can say, this is part of the learning process. God is refining me. One response leads to discouragement. The other leads to growth. The difference is not the event itself, but the words you attach to it. Over 3 days, you may become more aware of how often negativity tries to slip back in. Old patterns don't disappear quietly, but awareness gives you power. Each time you replace a negative thought with a faith-filled statement, you are strengthening a new way of thinking. You are training your mind to default to trust instead of fear. This practice also builds spiritual sensitivity. When you speak words aligned with God's truth, you become more aware of His presence. You begin to sense His guidance more clearly. You feel less rushed and more intentional. That clarity doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from having the right perspective. As you continue this for 3 days, you may notice subtle but meaningful changes. You approach conversations with more confidence. You handle pressure with more calm. You stop doubting every decision. These changes may seem small, but they are significant. They are signs that your inner world is becoming stronger and more stable. Your future is greatly influenced by what you repeatedly say about it. If you keep saying, I don't know how this will work out, your faith remains uncertain. But when you say, God is making a way, hope rises. Hope fuels perseverance. Perseverance keeps you moving forward even when progress feels slow. You were not meant to live in constant mental conflict. God designed you to live from a place of peace and confidence. When your self-talk aligns with His truth, your mind becomes a place of agreement rather than resistance. You stop fighting yourself. You stop questioning your worth. You begin to walk in quiet assurance. This is why talking to yourself the right way, even for a short, focused period, can lead to lasting change. It resets your expectations. It renews your confidence. It strengthens your faith. And from that inner transformation, everything else begins to follow.